May the words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be always righteous in your sight. Amen. I wonder if this evening's reading from 2 Corinthians made anybody feel a little bit uncomfortable. It's one of those readings that touches on something that's not always easy to talk about. Indeed, it's so difficult for many that Lloyds Bank is running a series of television adverts on it right at the moment. The M word, money, and how it's actually good to talk about money. With the reading for this evening, it'd be rude not to touch on the subject with you all now, although I'd like to focus not on the M word. Rather, I prefer to focus on the G word. Giving? No. The G word I'm thinking of is grace. Grace is a wonderful thing. The fact that we, often undeserving, as we commonly are honoured by the gifts of a Father who wants to be a part of our lives. Although unmerited, we have God's favour, and through this, the support of the Holy Spirit in our lives. God asks us to give, but how often do we think of excuses or reasons why perhaps we cannot? If only we had a bit more time, or were perhaps more skilled. If only we had the confidence to lead a group or had a job with a better income. If I won the lottery, of course, I would give a sizable amount in light of God's favour. But if we had the time, the skills, the confidence, or the money, how quickly would many of us give this back to God? The reading this evening is a challenging one, but if we're giving out of a sense of obligation and not from an act of grace, are we truly giving at all? That's how the reading starts. Paul extols to the people of Corinth how the members of the Macedonian church had given in faith. Just as God gives out of his abundance of power and love to us, the people of Macedonia had done the same, giving a fair amount of themselves for those in need. This was not in payment. No invoice had been generated with 30-day payment terms upon it. Rather, the church in Macedonia had given because it was the right thing to do. The giving was given freely. It is this message that Paul is imparting to the people of Corinth. But more, that there's a boon to us when we ourselves give in grace. Here's a quote from our reading. For, as I can testify, they voluntarily gave according to their means, and even beyond their means, begging us earnestly for the privilege of sharing in this ministry to the saints. That's familiar to many people, I think. With Christmas only, 19 weeks away, how many of us have a tendency to spend more on presents for friends, for family, or perhaps ourselves, than we might normally consider reasonable to spend in a day-to-day? It's interesting how we mourn the passing of our monthly salaries on bills and groceries, but can often find that extra bit of money for the holidays. Paul here, however, makes clear the principle that the people of Macedonia gave generously out of a love of God, finding more to give because it mattered as much to give for God as to give for themselves, that there was for them a joy to give for Christ. A little earlier in this letter, Paul explained the background to the Macedonians' giving, how, during a severe ordeal of affliction, their abundant joy and their extreme poverty had overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. An idea that in the depth of their own poverty, they gave all the more. That's something I've seen firsthand, as I believe our own Philip, Francis, and Anne have too. In Central Africa, where the social safety net is sadly thin and so many have so little, there's a clear solidarity with the Christian message being very clear, with faith not hidden from view but proudly worn and beaming from the faces of the people. It seems that, although clearly lacking in what we would consider a minimum standard of daily life, faith and a collective joy in God rings all the clearer because of it. It seems that where they have so little in monetary wealth, they make up for it in faith, and collectively they come together. What Paul is coming down to here, I think, is there is a difference between an obligation or a promise to doing something and actually coming through to do it. The Corinthians had promised to Titus previously to share in a collection for the churches. But good intentions with no follow-through are ultimately hollow and meaningless. But how we give makes a difference. Understanding why we give and for what purpose we give changes an obligation into a willingness. Grace cannot be forced. It must come from a willing heart. We can all give in different ways to help one another. A shared lift to the shops or to church. The offer of a meal to another who may be away from home and from family. To offer to lead a group or support an event with our talents. The recent Pennington summer event and the preceding Christmas event were greatly enjoyed by the people of Pennington. Enjoyed by hundreds, perhaps thousands, I'm not quite sure the number, but only facilitated by literally tens of people. But imagine how much more could be done with a few more helpers, or how much easier the load for those who assisted would have been with additional offers of help. The same applies at St. Mark's here too. We do some truly fantastic things when we come together, through donations at the plate, through regular giving, or supporting events that are hosted here, such as an upcoming Ride and Stride Historic Churches Walk in September, concerts, and some talks coming up too. St. Mark's can kindle and grow a Christian centre in our community. It doesn't matter how much you make, or how good you are at a task or a skill. It doesn't matter how much time you have either. What matters is that in all we do, we must first ensure we are giving in grace. Amen.